It is my pleasure as Treasurer of the Inn to introduce this evening's lecture, the first of this year's Treasurer's Lectures. It is entitled Pro Bono, Part of Being a Barrister. One important objective that I have this year is to encourage our members at all levels to do some pro bono work. Access to justice by the poor, the vulnerable, and the underprivileged has been severely impeded by the unavailability of legal aid in most civil and immigration cases. Litigants in person are seen more and more in our courts and tribunals. And for many, it's an overwhelming experience, a bewildering voyage into the unknown. There is little point in conferring rights on individuals if people are unable to enforce them effectively. That undermines the rule of law and equality of arms. This can be remedied by barristers providing their advocacy skills, legal expertise, their care and energy to assist those individuals free of charge. Members of the bar are often portrayed, in my view quite unfairly, as living in an ivory tower and out of touch with the real world. A genuine commitment to pro bono work by a large cohort of barristers can change this unjustified perspective. Speaking personally, two of the most important cases I have argued in the Court of Appeal were pro bono cases. They made important changes to the law of race and sex discrimination, and it was some of the most professionally rewarding work that I have ever done. We have a section on the Middle Temple website entitled Volunteering, and within that there is a subsection entitled Middle Temple and the Wider Community. After this lecture, I urge you to log in and look at it. There you can find details of 12 different pro bono organizations where you can volunteer to use your skills and your experience to make a significant difference. At the top of the list is Advocate, the bar's national pro bono charity. It was created by the bar and it's sustained by the bar. It matches members of the public who need free legal help with barristers who are willing to donate their time and expertise in deserving cases. Currently, it has a funding campaign, which is called the £35 Initiative. That encourages barristers to donate money to Advocate when renewing their practicing certificate. Last year, that charity placed over 1,400 pieces of work. That was a 79% increase on the previous year. Its ability to help so many people was to a large extent because of the donations received from the £35 Initiative, which made up nearly 50% of its funding. So when you come to renew your practicing certificate, please do consider making such a donation. Now, this evening, we are fortunate indeed to have two champions in the field of pro bono work, to give you their insight as to why it is so important and how you can benefit those who really need your help. I will introduce each of them in turn. The first to speak tonight is Master Robin Knowles. He has achieved so much in his career, it would take too long to describe all of those achievements. But let me give you some highlights. He was called to the bar in 1982, and he took silk in 1999. He was elected a bencher of this inn in 2004 and was chair of the Commercial Bar Association from 2005 to 2007. In 2006, he received the honor of a CBE for service to pro bono legal services, of which more anon. Until his full-time judicial appointment, he had an impressive commercial practice, sat as a recorder and a deputy high court judge, and was both a qualified mediator and an arbitrator. In 2014, Sir Robin was appointed a High Court judge in the Queen's Bench Division. As such, he sits in the Commercial Court, the Administrative Court, and the Court of Appeal Criminal Division. He is also a designated judge in the Financial List. I now turn to his pro bono activity. So Robin has included pro bono and access to justice work at all stages of his professional life. In his early practice at the bar, he worked pro bono on capital cases from jurisdictions with an appeal to the Privy Council. He has served on the board of so many pro bono organizations, both nationally and internationally. In particular, he assisted Lord Goldsmith QC in the early years of the Bar Pro Bono Unit, which has become Advocate. He is currently chair of that organization and of the National Pro Bono Centre. He also chairs the Access to Bar Standing Committee of the Civil Justice Council and the Litigants in Person Engagement Group for the HMCTS Courts Reform Programme. He sits on the board of the RCJ Advice Bureau. He helped establish Advocates for International Development, and in 2020, Sir Robin was deservedly awarded the Institute of Paralegals Outstanding Achievement Award. One wonders if he has any spare time at all. It is now my pleasure to hand over to Master Robin Knowles.
Good evening. I'm very grateful to Master Treasurer for those kind words, and to Master Treasurer and the Middle Temple for this invitation and this opportunity. Most people cannot afford to purchase professional legal services, and yet anyone could find themselves or those they love needing services of this kind at some point. Often that point would be in circumstances never expected, but circumstances that could happen to anyone. And when that happens, some will get legal aid, but most will not. Too often, if they try to continue or to defend alone, they will fail. We can leave them there, or we can do something. They include the cleaner paid below minimum wage, the night security guard made to work in unsafe conditions, the single parent entitled to support from the state for disability, but who is refused or delayed, the self-employed person whose insurer refuses to pay when illness prevents earning. They include the corner shop owner with family above the shop, facing proceedings for possession, the parents concerned over an inquest into a lost family member, the teacher or the nurse facing a disciplinary allegation and finding themselves unsupported by their union, the elderly grandparent who fears for her grandchildren in the midst of a dispute between parents. And they include those trying to bring proper care around looked after children or life-limited children, but who cannot get one or more of the authorities to respond. And they include the young inventor who has developed a product only to be met with oppressive business tactics from a large competitor, the homeless and the undocumented victim of modern slavery is there as well. In summary, they are from across society in all its diversity. They are the public. They include your neighbours and mine. They include those who play parts, often behind the scenes, in our lives, whether at school, supermarket, hospital, or in entertainment. Those who drive trucks or buses, who look after parks, who keep us safe. Those who've retired, those who cannot work, those who are unwell, and often, so often, those who are vulnerable. The pandemic brings home even more sharply how quickly health, home, job, business can suddenly be at stake. These are moments when those affected need more than ever to be able to count on the law. How terrifying it would be to be without help, yet that is the position that many find themselves in. The pandemic has shown how out of reach the justice system already was for many, that many of our population have concluded that the law and the justice system is not available for the likes of them. Sometimes a person needing professional legal help will have the merits, and of course sometimes not. Without advice, without skilled advice, they may not know. The result is that the weak case is often pursued, the strong case is often not pursued, or the strong case is pursued badly and fails. And each of those results does harm that is avoidable and carries consequences that are wider across families and dependents and workers. And add to that ours is largely an adversarial system. So although there are other parallels between, say, a lawyer and a doctor, in one respect, leaving people without a lawyer is not like leaving them without a doctor. The adversarial system means that often there's a lawyer on the other side, actively working, professionally, but actively working to challenge the case or the defense and to cause it to fail. With failure, whether as claimant or defendant, there may be liability then for adverse costs that obviously the person cannot afford. One way or another, a case without professional legal help can cost a home, a job, a relationship, and physical and mental health. And for a legal system that depends for its viability on a reputation for fairness, it can end up with unfairness. For a legal system that is committed to equality before the law, what happens in some cases does not look equal. As members of the legal profession, we know where and how the law can help. That puts us in a position to serve the public, and not just the part of the public that can afford our services, and not only where Parliament has decided that legal aid is available. Pro bono legal work is the unique charitable endeavour of the legal profession. It is a badge of the bar's integrity in circumstances not of its making, just as is undertaking legally aided work that is underpaid. These are signs of the bar's commitment, come what may, to the public and the public interest. Sometimes merely an hour or two of advice can make a difference. Sometimes it's a day of representation. Sometimes it's more. But remember how little that is compared with what the person needing help is going through. Over the decades, the bar has evolved the infrastructure that can help facilitate its contribution, coordinate its deployment, and share the load of pro bono work across the profession. Through the Free Representation Unit, led the way in the field of employment tribunals. In Advocate, the bar has its clearinghouse. Its operation is nationwide, in all areas of law, and at every level of the courts and tribunals system. Advocate has developed the control mechanisms that can get the right case to the right barrister and keep contributions proportionate to the case. With a clearinghouse, those needing the help of a barrister or the advice agencies that are already assisting them are able to go to one place for that help. At the same time, Advocate has the relationships to bring in other help where needed. These include with LawWorks, the solicitors pro bono group, and Pro Bono Connect, so as to bring solicitors and barristers together on pro bono cases where that is needed. Advocate stands behind a number of the on-the-day duty schemes. It is part of the National Pro Bono Centre. It actively participates in development across the wider access to justice sector, including through what is known as the LIP support strategy and the LIP engagement group. Advocate convenes with the access to justice sector as a whole at the Civil Justice Council's National Forum, and during the pandemic has joined cross-sector roundtables held monthly. There is part in this that every barrister can play at every stage of their life in the law, from student to junior to QC, in-house or in practice or academic or retired. And as so often in an area of endeavour, you will get something back. This may be gratitude from someone you've helped, but it will be a gratitude with a quality you will not experience from those who can pay you. There's a fulfillment from this work that is of a unique kind. Take the examples that Master Treasurer himself gave earlier on this evening. He went into the law to do some good and because the rule of law mattered. And when you ask him, as I have, and as he's shared this evening, what are the highlights of your career? And you find him naming pro bono cases, and not just from early in his career. For all of us, we find that our career develops our skills and experience. As a younger barrister, pro bono can also contribute to building your professional network. For the aspiring QC, there are reasons why the QC application form has moved on from asking you what you earn to giving you room instead to discuss understanding gained through pro bono work. And collectively, this all is and should be a source of pride for each of us in our profession. The pandemic has hit the practices of many barristers really hard, and yet the bar has contributed more pro bono work during the pandemic through Advocate than ever before. The contribution that a barrister can best make may and undoubtedly will change as their career changes. But I urge that there is no point in the life of any barrister at which there is not a contribution to be made. A little later this evening, Rebecca Wilkie will give us some illustrations of the areas in which a contribution can be made. I have been asked to give a few glimpses from the experience that I have been lucky enough to have. Of course, I have taken on cases for pro bono advice and representation, mediation too. Some of those cases of pro bono representation have involved memorable adventures, but also with many senior colleagues, I have reviewed cases at Advocate for their suitability for pro bono advice and representation. You could volunteer at a clinic, at an advice agency. I have, and I've chaired advice agencies. I was a trustee of LawWorks as it established a network across England and Wales of advice agency clinics. And then you and I are trained in drafting. And therefore, like me, you can draft content that may play a valuable role in the provision of online advice. Persuading and encouraging our colleagues, including clerks, to help collectively is key. And you can do that as I have done. Like many others, I have mentored the pro bono work of more junior volunteers, including as a pupil supervisor, and spoken to many at universities who are running clinics and other pro bono activity there, here and abroad. Pro bono work at university and in training, of course, is what will help inspire the best to enter the profession. Barristers can also help with working groups that develop the arrangements and infrastructure for effective pro bono work. I had the privilege of chairing the arrangements to establish the Access to Justice Foundation and Roll UK, which helps support international pro bono work with resources. I've found myself chairing or co-chairing many discussions, including the standing collaborations that I've mentioned a little earlier in this lecture. And you could participate too around those important tables for discussion, innovation, and then action. There is governance and strategic work, such is the scale and importance of this endeavour, that is to be done on the boards of the charities involved. And for me, as well as for Advocate, and as well as Bar in the Community, this has included the National Pro Bono Centre and others, and not so long ago, the public legal education charity Law for Life, or Advice Now. And as I've found, you can do these things, I've given just some examples, in this country or overseas, internationally, or both. And you can do them alongside other contributions. Will you forgive me if I say I am proud of having been chair of ComBar whilst also chairing Advocate? What of those who feel that they are specialists in fields that are less often called for by pro bono, called on for pro bono advice or representation? Well, there are plenty of ways to contribute, and ways that are other than the provision of advice or representation. I've indicated some. But even when we think about advice and representation, think how you could extend your subject area. If you would for a fee-paying case, then do for a pro bono case. Remember, if you can analyze evidence in one area, you may be well able to in another. If you are competent in statutory or contract interpretation in one field, you may be in another. Advocate is often able to combine members of the bar so that expertise jointly in a new field comes together. Other opportunities for pro bono volunteering across the profession are highlighted annually in Pro Bono Week. Last November's Pro Bono Week was the 19th such week. It comprised more than 55 events. One of those was organised by Middle Temple Young Barristers Association, jointly with the Junior London Solicitors Association and the London Young Lawyers Group. And Middle Temple now has an important section on volunteering on its website, This too can help us contribute. Indeed, it's another welcome example of how the ins are alongside us for the things that are important throughout our professional lives. The Bar's Pro Bono Awards each year also contain inspiring examples of what you could consider doing, as do awards by the Government Legal Service and by the Employed Bar Association. So many choices of contribution, every one of them important, all coming together to make a difference from the bar. But there's also this: donations of money matter too. All this work depends on the infrastructure that underpins it, from the administration of clearinghouses like Advocate and FRU to the development work of the charity Justice. And that infrastructure does depend on your and my donations. There's a broader canvas to all this. First, pro bono work increases the potential for greater understanding by the public of the law and of the legal profession, including the bar. And second, pro bono work promotes greater understanding by the profession of the diverse society that it serves. The more we undertake pro bono, the more we have direct access to evidence and data on what is needed and how change is working. This is now more relevant than ever with the opportunities of the age of technology. A few years ago, a partner in a leading US law firm was asked, what are the greatest strengths of the US justice system? The answer came, structurally, we have a system that is unparalleled to just about any country worldwide. But then asked about the challenges, the partner said, we have a significant percentage of the population that effectively has no access to that system. She could have been speaking of our system in England and Wales. This position is not sustainable. We compartmentalize that legal system into specialisms, but in the end, it's one legal system. The major commercial law firms and chambers recognize that lack of access to justice weakens the strength and reputation of the legal system that they represent internationally. The in-house legal profession in corporate UK PLC recognizes the same. If we want UK law to remain the asset it is as a global law of choice, then we need to work on access to justice at home. It is therefore no surprise today to find a partnership between the Commercial Litigators Forum, COMBAR, GC 100, that is the Association of FTSE 100 General Counsel, and the National Pro Bono Centre. So another part of that broader canvas is this: in helping tackle access to justice, pro bono work contributes an enduring strategic gain to UK PLC. We should be looking at legal aid in the same way, but that's another lecture. So there you have it. In 2020, if the bar had not worked pro bono, the tenants of unlicensed landlords would not have had representation on a successful appeal of general importance. A victim of historic child sexual abuse would not have had advice. There would have been no assistance to an individual against a multinational in a data protection case. A wildlife trust would have been without representation on a successful planning appeal concerning a site of public importance. Only by the profession working without charge did we avoid leaving a family who lost a child at birth to cope alone at a 3-week inquest with 34 witnesses and wider lessons for the future of maternity services would not have been learned. But for pro bono, a leading mental health charity would have been unable to intervene on an appeal. Many applicants for immigration bail would not have had representation. A child with disabilities would have had no representation against a decision of permanent exclusion from school. An unaccompanied minor would have been left alone to deal with an appeal after his asylum application was refused, and criminal injuries compensation would not have been won at a proper level through appeal. Without pro bono work by barristers in 2020, those running a food bank would have had to do their best on their own in relation to a property dispute. Others would not have had, who would not have had assistance, include Commonwealth veterans, those harmed by Windrush, and victims of domestic violence in lockdown. And without a third year of pro bono work by leading and junior counsel and a university, a criminal appeal to the Court of Appeal that was ultimately successful would not even have reached there. Add these further examples and more to the people in need that I mentioned at the beginning of this lecture. We can leave them there, or we can do something. Whether you are at the start of this profession or you are at the top of it, pro bono is part of being a barrister. This is the rule of law, and you get to do it. With my thanks for your time and support.
Master Knowles, thank you very much for such an informative, enlightening, and personal insight into pro bono work. It was a real call to arms. Now, before I introduce our next speaker, I would like to just remind you that if you have any questions on pro bono work that is arising from either of our speakers' talks tonight, please could you put them in the chat function that you will find at the bottom of your screen. Or alternatively, in the invitation that you were sent, there is a dedicated email address, which is o.muncy@middletemple.org.uk. Now, our next speaker this evening is Rebecca Wilkie, the Chief Executive of Advocate. She has also enjoyed a very impressive career in pro bono work. She qualified as a solicitor at Hogan Lovells, but then went into the pro bono sector. She spent 4 years working at LawWorks, setting up pro bono clinics with law firms nationwide. And thereafter, she was chief executive of what was known then as the Bar Pro Bono Unit, before becoming program director for the Litigant in Person Support Strategy. As well as being chief executive of Advocate, she is currently a trustee of Money Advice Trust, which helps people across the UK to tackle their debts. And she also holds a number of governmental and professional advisory roles, including sitting on the Courts Reform Programme and the Litigants in Person Engagement Group. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Rebecca Wilkie.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Master Treasurer and Middle Temple, for giving us the opportunity to share our thoughts with you this evening. Over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to focus on two things. Firstly, I want to tell you more about the work of Advocate. Secondly, and most importantly, I want to explain how you can get involved with pro bono today. Firstly, about us. At Advocate, we match people in need of free advice and representation with barristers from our panel of volunteers. We strongly believe we have a responsibility to provide access to justice for those unable to obtain it. And we're talking here about people who aren't eligible for legal aid and cannot afford to pay. And let me be clear, because it's important to state at the outset, just as Robin has done, that Advocate fully supports a properly funded legal system. But pro bono is critical for those who will inevitably fall through the cracks. These are vulnerable people who will otherwise be totally on their own in the legal system. The people that Advocate was designed to support when it was set up by the bar. We feel extraordinarily lucky to enjoy a strong relationship with the profession, created by the bar 25 years ago and sustained by the bar to this day. I believe our existence speaks volumes about the profession's commitment to access to justice, not only in donating time and expertise on a pro bono basis, but financially too. We are funded almost entirely by the bar. Now we know and we totally understand, the Advocate team, how busy life is for you practitioners. So it's important to us to try and make it as easy as possible for you to volunteer and to try and provide a rewarding experience. So I thought I'd take just a few minutes to try and explain some of the nuts and the bolts. All cases we receive are reviewed by senior barristers. We call them our reviewers, and they have special expertise in particular areas of law. All cases that come through to us are reviewed by them, which means that if they're accepted for help, our panel members know they've been deemed as deserving by senior members of the profession. So what do the reviewers think about when they're looking at these cases? Well, just a couple of things to mention. Firstly, and importantly, they see, is help available from somewhere else? If somebody can afford to pay for it themselves, is there legal expenses insurance that somebody is unaware of, but perhaps they could use? Is there a trade union in place? Secondly, is a solicitor required to assist with this type of work? Where a solicitor is professionally required to assist for a piece of work to be done properly, then we may not be able to help. In some instances, we can do, as Robin said, we enjoy a good relationship with Pro Bono Connect, who can provide solicitors to help in some cases, but not all of them. And thirdly, does the case merit assistance on a pro bono basis? Crucially, our reviewers are there to try and ensure that actually we're only accepting cases that are deemed deserving. For example, there may be a case where there's just a small amount of money at stake that isn't material to the applicant, and for example, if it's taking place in the small claims court. So the reviewers are there to safeguard your valuable and limited time. If, having had a preliminary look at the papers, they think, well, actually, yes, this is deserving of assistance, then they come back to the casework team at Advocate saying, this is the type of barrister we think you should try and find to assist. So they set out the area of expertise, the experience we need, and set out exactly the piece of work that's required. Importantly, and I really want to clarify it here today, is that work is authorised by us on a step-by-step basis. So for advice, drafting, or representation, you don't need to do the case from start to finish. And I think sometimes that's a concern which people understandably have, but that's not the case. We are there to support you at every stage of your journey with us and taking a case with us. We're in the middle there with the casework team. They're the first point of contact initially for all of our applicants, and we enjoy strong relationships with chambers and clerks in case there are any issues. We have Bryony, our volunteer manager. She's a dedicated internal point of contact to help volunteers with anything they may need. But crucially, the reviewers, the senior members of the bar who are looking at these cases, they're available to speak to any panel members if they take on a case that have queries about the case that was reviewed by them, and trustees too, so you're not alone. This year is our 25th year. We're going to be focusing on strengthening our casework service to make it the best it can be for volunteers and applicants. We want to increase our reach to people in need of our help by working in partnership with the voluntary sector, to make sure that people on the front line know that they can refer people to us in order to access pro bono at the bar. We want to deepen our relationship with the bar to celebrate 25 years of the bar's pro bono work. And finally, and importantly, we want to build a stronger organisation with secure financial underpinning. So though I could happily talk about Advocate for quite significant periods of time, I think much more importantly is to talk about, well, how can you get involved today? And the Master Treasurer and Robin and I thought it'd be really useful to try and actually give you some practical pointers. And of course I would say this, but pro bono, there really is something for everyone. And let me make that good with a list of examples. Admittedly, no matter how hard I try to draft this, it really does come across as a shopping list, so for which I have to apologise, but it's a really important shopping list. So I'm going to unashamedly crack on. So the first opportunity, please, if you haven't done so already, think about joining our panel of volunteers. At the moment, for example, we're trying to place 190 requests for help. Whether you're in your second six, whether you're QC, we'd be delighted to have you on board. It's easy to sign up through our website. People just indicate what areas of law that interest you, and then you can receive case lists on a weekly, fortnightly, or monthly basis that are tailored to you. Or some people find it really useful, some of our panel members, to log into our members area where they can see all the cases we have available at any time in the event that a case suddenly settles and the space in their diary becomes clear. We're fortunate to have over 4,000 barristers, so you'd be in good company if you joined us. But I also wanted to explain why we need such a large panel. Because actually, if help is requested in a particular area of law, in a particular location, on a particular date, before we know it, actually the panel who we have available is pretty small. So you're all most welcome to join. Another option with us is to be a reviewer of cases. As I said, to check whether cases are actually suitable for pro bono help. They're an essential part of the advocate team. They assess cases for the rest of the bar on your behalf and ensure the right cases are put forward pro bono help. You must have regularly practiced as a barrister in the last 2 years and for at least 7 of the last 10 years. We tend to send our reviewers a maximum of 4 cases a month, and we send them online, so it's easy for you to do. But I thought I should say be really happy to put you in touch. If anyone's even thinking of doing this, we could put you in touch with an existing reviewer to talk the option through, because though I understand we would say, well, this is a great opportunity, there's nothing like actually talking to somebody who actually does it to see if that really is the case. Another option which Robin mentioned is that there's the option of volunteering at an evening or online initial advice or specialist advice clinic. These take place all around the country, but just last Friday I was contacted by a barrister who was formerly at Searle Court with a plea this evening if I can mention South Westminster Legal Advice Clinic. They were formerly a face-to-face service based in central London, so local to Middle Temple. But now, due to the pandemic, they're a remote service, which means that people can volunteer anyway, from anywhere within England and Wales. They welcome pupils 6 upwards and would welcome anyone to get involved with them. I didn't actually speak to Master Treasurer and Robin about this earlier today, but I'm slightly aware that there are a lot of different options that I'm going to be giving you today. So at the end, or whether I circulate it afterwards, I'm very happy for my personal email to be circulated. So if people are interested in following up on any of these opportunities, do get in touch with me, then I can forward you on to the right person. One of the other options for people who perhaps want to volunteer a bit more regularly, but on a kind of diarised basis, is through the really invaluable on-the-day duty schemes. We have a list of them on Advocate's website, but just a couple who suggested, who said they would like us to mention them this evening because they're looking for volunteers. Is firstly CLIPS, the Chancery Bar Litigant in Person Support Scheme. CLIPS can only be done by members of the Chancery Bar Association, ComBar, Tech Bar, Property Bar Association and ELBA, and they have spaces available on the rota for next week. So really, time is of the essence. We need you now. The rota is available on the Chancery Bar Association's website. And just an example was last week, one of the volunteers doing his first CLIPS session was able to resist an application for an injunction made against a litigant in person and obtained a pro bono costs order. Over 700 volunteer days have been done over the last 3 years for more than 60 different sets. So please do think about getting involved if you haven't already done so. And then for employment volunteers out there, ELA runs the Employment Tribunal Litigant in Person Support Scheme. Since August, they've been running a virtual clinic for litigants in person who are involved in a live claim in one of the 4 employment tribunals in London Central, Bristol, Cardiff, Midlands West. And they provide one-off advice on the day of the clinic. So again, any employment barristers out there who are looking for opportunities, they'll be absolutely delighted to welcome you onto their books. We've spoken about some of the domestic work, but as Robin highlighted, there's an important international angle here too. And I spoke earlier today with the Bar Human Rights Committee and Zimran Samuel from Doughty Street, who was Junior Pro Bono Barrister of the Year with the Bar Pro Bono Awards in 2020. And he was just an example of somebody who took on a case shortly after pupillage through us. He then pursued an appeal to the Court of Appeal on a pro bono basis led by QC. But then importantly, really early on in his career, actually started getting involved with international pro bono work through the Bar Human Rights Committee. Opportunities through them, both for students, importantly from undergraduate level upwards, include trial observations, research, drafting statements of concern, producing reports in collaboration with UN bodies and others. There's a whole host of different opportunities there, so please do get involved. Another option, again, Robin flags, and personally I've done myself, is trustees are always invaluable for charities. We need them, and you as a barrister can provide invaluable help from a governance perspective. Through Bar in the Community, we have options available for people, so please do get in touch. If you don't feel like necessarily providing legal advice yourself, but actually just advising a charity more strategically in the work they're doing with a legal hat on, then that would be warmly welcomed. On Advocate's behalf, we'd also put in a final plea for pro bono champions. It does what it says on the tin. These are members within chambers, either on the clerking team or barristers themselves, who are willing to be a point of contact for Advocate, to try and persuade and encourage colleagues to do pro bono work, and be delighted if you think about joining with us. Because it's our 25th year, one of the other things we're going to launch this year is an official mentoring scheme for junior members of the bar, taking on cases. We're looking to launch it in April when the second six starts. And so anyone, either senior members of the bar who'd be willing to consider mentoring, please get in touch with us. We'd love to use your skills to match you up, as I said, either with junior members of the bar on a particular case working together, or sometimes mentoring a panel member who's taking on a case in their area of law for the first time. And finally, last but by no means least, we wanted to cover another option for students, which is through the Free Representation Unit. Students and junior members of the bar can volunteer through them. They provide representation in employment and social security hearings, and they're running training days in the spring for new volunteers. If you're interested in volunteering, they said, please sign up via their website where you'll find dates for the next training that's available. As I said, I'm only too well aware, this is a long, long wish list, but when the Master Treasurer invited us to speak about pro bono tonight to Middle Temple members and their guests, it felt like too good an opportunity to be missed. So if you're interested in any of these, please do email me and I will gladly point you in the right direction. Thank you.
Rebecca, thank you so much. It was a lot of information, and I'm sure that the offer of being able to contact you on your email when you can give further details that people can follow up will be really helpful. I would end by making a couple of points before throwing open the floor to questions. I am very pleased that 2 members of this Inn have been nominated as Leading and Junior Barrister of the Year in Advocates 2020 Pro Bono Awards. They are Charles Toomey QC, who I'm delighted to say was once my pupil, and also Kieran Whitehead. So I would like to congratulate them, firstly for the work that they've done, and secondly for being so nominated. I'm sure that they will tell you how much they have gained from the work that they have done. In terms of questions, I have a number and I see the time, so I will try to do 4 or 5 before we call it a night. The first, it comes from Master Deputy Treasurer, Master McGowan, and she has made a point to me of the importance of asking for pro bono cost orders when undertaking pro bono work. Rebecca, can you say a little about that?
Yes, of course. So in pro bono cases, in the event of a costs order being made, you can actually ask for there to be a pro bono costs order, and through which costs actually are payable to the Access to Justice Foundation, which Robin alluded to earlier. So in the event of those cases, pro bono costs, which can run into their thousands in some of the pro bono cases we've had just in the past few weeks, means that those awards go to the Access to Justice Foundation, which is a charity who then distribute it in a series of grants to frontline organisations all around the country. So entirely right to flag that up as a fantastic way to get more money back into the sector. So there's further information about that on our website, but if not, it's the Access to Justice Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Master Knowles, this is a question for you. Somebody has said as follows: I ask this as someone who agrees with everything said and who fully supports barristers doing pro bono work. But is there a danger that those in charge, by which I understand to mean the government, start to take pro bono work for granted and use it almost as an excuse to squeeze access to justice yet further?
I understand the point. I answer it in this way. The access to justice need will always require a mix of legal aid and of pro bono work. By undertaking pro bono work, we recognize that reality. We also ensure that we are really informed to be able to identify where greater help, including publicly funded help, is needed. And then I add finally that if we undertake pro bono work rather than just leaving it, that's the way in which the public generally will see the value of the law and the contribution that we would like to make. If there's anything that could shift public opinion towards public funding as a good thing, I think that may be it.
Thank you. This is a question that has been asked by several people in slightly different forms, but they are dealing with people who have yet started pupillage or are midway through pupillage. And what has been said is, I'm a pupil. I expect to be on my feet in my second six from late March. I'm especially interested in ET claims. If I put myself forward for cases at advocate, will I be instructed by a solicitor acting pro bono? I'm asking because it was my understanding that I can't accept direct instructions during pupillage or my first 3 years of practice. Rebecca, would you like to deal with that?
Yes, of course. From second six, people are instructed, but they're instructed by advocate through our direct access license. They make use of that. So that's why we don't have solicitors in place there. They make use of our license, which is why from second six onwards, they can take cases in the employment tribunal through us, or also through the free representation unit, who I mentioned as well. So that's another opportunity, particularly if you're not yet at second six stage, if you're a student, that's another opportunity you can consider. So I would suggest free representation unit as well.
What about support through court? Is that of any use for students?
I think support through court so for people who aren't aware of them, that's a charity that provides emotional and practical guidance for litigants in person. So they used to be, well, they still are based in some courts where they're still open, but they now have a national phone line as well. So litigants in person who are calling up and just wanting some help with their case is importantly not legal advice, but the emotional side can talk to. They're often either students or also interestingly retired professionals as well. So they tend to run through existing schemes with universities. So quite a lot of our caseworkers, for example, used to be involved in it, and it's a fantastic opportunity to get involved alongside litigants in person to see what it's like from their side. And also, interestingly, support through court are now assisting in remote hearings as well. So there are different opportunities available through them as well.
Thank you. Can we talk about insurance? Robin, what scale of first-line insurance should be held by barristers doing perhaps only pro bono work?
The level of insurance required is simply equal to that which one would take out to cover one's ordinary practice. We have, through Advocate and therefore on to the other pro bono efforts that we underpin, the best possible relationship with Bar Mutual. Bar Mutual sees the pro bono endeavour as part of being in the profession, and I commend them for that.
And finally, a question really for both of you. The questioner says that he or she is what is described as a newly minted barrister with a practicing certificate, and is concerned about undertaking pro bono work because his or her lack of experience could lead to a mistake that could be career ending. Is such a fear justified? And if so, what steps can be taken to mitigate this fear? Robin, would you like to go first?
Willingly. If we see a pro bono contribution as part of being a barrister, then that fear is identical to the one that we would face if we were being paid for the case, if the case was on legal aid. All of the profession's ability to support the individual in that context are there. Colleagues in chambers and clerks and the like. It's another thing that Advocate offers, though. If there's any concern of that nature, we can make sure there's a conversation with a senior practitioner. We can bring another practitioner alongside. We can try and bring about that piece of work involves you, but not you alone. Perhaps you for the first time alongside somebody more senior. But in the end, provided we treat pro bono as part of being in the profession looks out for and guides us in those situations. One needs to press on with things for the first time, but not in a way that's unwise.
Rebecca, would you add anything to that?
Thank you. Yes, the only bit I'd add is that one, you can be reassured that because we have the senior barristers who are making the decision as to whether we should provide help, and they identify what level of call is appropriate. So we already will have some indication of whether it's open to somebody who's a junior end or not. So one, that's in place there. But also that we have the mentoring scheme, like we mentioned, so people are there to help you throughout the process. It's understandable to be apprehensive about it, but please don't let that put you off. You have 48 hours to look at the papers, and if you have a look and think, this is beyond me, that's totally fine. You can just send it back and we'll happily send you another one.
And I think it's really part and parcel of a profession that prides itself on assisting other people. You know, being collegiate in chambers and being able to run points past other people is all part of a mutual support mechanism. And that applies equally to whether it's paid work or whether it's pro bono work. But it's also reassuring to know that the organization itself has its own built-in support system. So from my perspective, all I would say is don't let your lack of experience put you off from undertaking pro bono work. As Robin Knowles said, we all have to start at some point. So come on in, the water is lovely. When you do, you'll enjoy it. All right, I think that that's an appropriate note on which to end tonight. I have enjoyed the evening immensely. You have both been inspirational speakers, and I do hope that the 147 of you who attended this, for which many thanks, will continue to do the pro bono work that you do. And if you haven't, it has whetted your appetite to take some on. Thank you all so much. It was a wonderful first Treasurer's lecture. I hope the others will be as good. Good night to you all.